amid a list of power brokers, world leaders, and cinematic game changers, it was the silence breakers, rather, I should say, who proved most influential in 2017. This morning, Time magazine named the women and men behind the Me Too movement Person of the Year. And that movement helped women across the country share their experiences with sexual harassment.
We want to know what you think about that decision. Was naming the movement the right choice, or should they have chosen someone else? You can weigh in right now on WBIR.com or in the WBIR app, and you can see some of the responses already showing up.
And while you do, NBC's Mark Barger shares how these voices started a movement that's erasing the stigmas attached to harassment.
2017 Person of the Year is the Silence Breakers, the voices that launched a movement.
Time magazine honored not one person, but many as its Person of the Year, announced on Today. Women who've shared their stories of sexual misconduct by high-profile men.
This is the fastest moving social change we've seen in decades.
Time praised women who've come forward just since October, initially with allegations against Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein, and then others in politics, entertainment, and media.
Stop the violence! Stop the rape!
Their collective frustration emboldened others to speak out.
I think women are starting to believe we don't have to just live like this.
It is a socio-political, cultural, gender revolution.
I am here to give you permission to be angry.
Social media gave a voice to some of that anger with the hashtag #MeToo. Activist Tarana Burke originated it a decade ago.
I could never have envisioned something that would change the world.
The hashtag found an even wider audience when actress Alyssa Milano tweeted it, looking for change.
I want companies to take on a code of conduct. I want companies to hire more women. I want to teach our children better.
Whether the moment that prompted Time's choice leads to a lasting movement,
I think now the work really begins,
will be answered in the years ahead.
And the runners-up for this year's honor were President Donald Trump and the Chinese president.
So we want to bring in a familiar face now, sociologist Dr. Tricia Bruce from Maryville College, as well as her husband, co-founder of software startup Cirrus Insight, Brandon Bruce. Thank you both for being here. Dr. Bruce, we're going to begin with you. You have been with us several times from the time this hashtag #MeToo movement launched to today, named Time Magazine's Person of the Year, if you will. Explain what this journey, if you will, has been like, just watching it play out.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the momentum behind this. You know, when the movement first emerged, especially around that hashtag #MeToo, that hashtag signals something. You know, me, a very isolated, individualized experience, but the two added this collective story, and it meant that a lot of people started telling their stories and seeing it as something bigger than themselves. And so I think from that, you get a real resurgence of, hey, this is an issue that we have to talk about. And clearly, by Time selecting this as the Person of the Year, it means that people are paying attention and people are talking about it for sure.
Does it remind you of any other movement that we've experienced or witnessed?
Yeah, you know, there are moments certainly when suddenly there's an attention to something that has been silenced in the past. Certainly my first book was on a movement that responded to the crisis of abuse in the Catholic Church. And that was something where even though the abuse had been years prior, suddenly people felt emboldened to tell their stories and to find accountability for it. So I think this is another place where others are seeing this happen and are willing to share their stories, and finally we're seeing some accountability for it and some cultural change as a response.
And do you see this as facilitating change, ongoing change, not just this movement right now, but beyond?
Yeah, that's the question. You know, the Time magazine called it the silence breakers, and I think there's something in that language that they use. You know, it's been silenced for so long, not just the issue of harassment and abuse in the workplace or beyond, but larger cultural issues that make it unequal for women and men to experience opportunities in life. And to break that means not only to break the silence in telling the story, but also to break maybe some of the norms and expectations that set people up on unequal playing fields.
Of course, the social media aspect of this campaign took off after accusations started to come out against Harvey Weinstein. Since then, we've seen countless victims come forward in almost every industry, and that's prompting changes at companies nationwide. Brandon, we want to bring in you to talk about some of those changes and just the ripple effect and the continual change we're going to see in the workplace environment.
Well, I think what's interesting is Melissa Milano talked about it in her interview. I think most, if not all, of the companies that have been in the news have codes of conduct. So I don't think there's been a shortage of policies internally, there's been a lack of enforcement. And so what we're seeing now with the hashtag #MeToo is a lot of sunlight on the issue and companies now enforcing the rules that have been on the books for a long time, but bad actors have gotten a pass. And now that it's out in the public sphere, employers are acting faster than I think we've ever seen before to take action against folks that have violated those policies. So you're seeing turnaround, for example, at NBC News with Matt Lauer. It was within 24 hours of coming to the executives that there was a firing. And so it's quick action on behalf of employers that's really starting to make a difference.
Yeah, changes when it comes to, yes, disciplining, firing when there's indeed a case, but also changes when it comes to even parties, situations within a workplace. You have the perfect example with your own workplace that as far as planning for Christmas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, part of our role, I think, as employers is climate control, and part of climate control is venue. And so as we and lots of other organizations are planning holiday parties, and interestingly, the number of holiday parties is going to be down this year. So it was down 4% last year, it's down 11% this year. And the really only major change, the economy is pretty similar, has been these revelations. So a lot of companies are taking a step back and saying, we're not ready to do this yet. But for those of us that want to continue doing holiday parties, I think we look at it closely and think, where can we set the right vibe for our companies? What's going to be the right setting? We're hosting ours at the Muse, the local Children's Science Museum, because we want it to be a family-friendly event. We want folks to bring their kids if they have them. We want to get to know people as family units and enjoy each other's company that way. It's also interesting to see more and more companies are restricting alcohol at company events, including at holiday parties, and that's up about 60% served alcohol last year, and it's going to go down to about half this year, so another drop of about 10 percentage points, because people want to be very careful about creating an environment in which people can have responsible fun and not regrettable fun.
We want both of you to weigh in on this, whether it's the workplace or personal settings. How do we move forward, and how do we continue to create harassment-free zones?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, a lot of this comes back down to the issue of misconduct and abuse that is unwanted. So unwanted advances in various ways. And, part of what Brandon is talking about is creating environments where that can't happen, and so certainly creating conditions and also creating organizational cultures where that's not as possible, and so that you have a place of consent. I think part of this means having a more explicit conversation about, hey, we don't have to get rid of hugs, but when I want to offer a hug, I'm going to offer a hug. Is it okay if I hug you? We learn to talk about things and we express it to make sure that there's always consent. And something like alcohol, perhaps reduces the ability for someone to consent.
Yeah, it's companies focusing on the work, and so all of us get close with our coworkers, and that's important. That's part of what it means to form a community and have a strong, tight-knit fabric. When you go to work, people have your back, and that's what we want to facilitate, but we want to draw very clear lines. That's why the codes of conduct, the policies are important, but beyond those written policies and the trainings that folks go through, management and employee trainings, there has to be that enforcement, so that if there is an incident, that it's rapid. Right? It's a rapid response. We can't have that here. Or if it's egregious, then there are going to be firings. And that's important to set the tone for the rest of the organization. I think a lot of the stories that have come out have been, first there's one allegation, and then there's more to come. And then what comes out is that the entire environment was toxic.
That
and it's been toxic
piece
for a long time.
Yeah.
And so they could have nipped those situations in the bud early.
That was the missing piece of the puzzle, it seems like, that enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, the Bruces, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Very great information that we can take forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.